Well, just to give you a bit of background to this topic, the moral cost to Australia of the American alliance. We've had this alliance going since 1942. 1942 was Australia's year of living dangerously, when the north coast of Australia was being bombed by Japanese Air Force and even Sydney Harbour was invaded on the 31st of May 1942 by the famous 3 midget submarines. Under those conditions, an alliance with the US seemed eminently sensible. Then, as now, the US was an enormous military presence. And it still is. I mean, this is the constant that really drives the US alliance, because the US actually spends on its military more than the total of the 7 next biggest military spenders in the world. It accounts for 39% of all military expenditure in the world. So there was no match for America as a military power, and hasn't been really since the end of the Second World War. Now, this wasn't just about might is right. In the 1940s, the United States played an important ethical role too. And one that is important, I mean, apart from the little fact that it was a major part of the defeat of Axis fascism during the Second World War, it also, at the end of the war, launched an extraordinary project that ended up in the Nuremberg trials. 13 trials held in the small city of Nuremberg between 1945 and 1949. This was a very enterprising and risky kind of project that was originally devised by the American Secretary for War, Henry Stimson, who actually managed to roll Roosevelt, and Roosevelt then rolled Stalin and Churchill to avoid what was the most popular way of dealing with Nazi war criminals, which was to simply shoot them. And Stimson, who was a lawyer, had a higher ambition than that. He wanted to put them on trial with due process and to establish a precedent that would be the cornerstone for international criminal law from then on. So these Nazi war criminals were to serve a purpose that was obviously abhorrent to them, that their trial was to be the basis of establishing an international rule of law. And it was Stimson's baby, as I said. He had to push it against enormous opposition, including from people who thought you can't have that sort of a trial in 4 languages, combining 4 different legal traditions and so on. And I thought this was such an extraordinary story that, and this is my little advertisement for tonight, I've written this novel called Rule of Law, which is set around the first Nuremberg trial. That was the international trial of 21 major Nazi criminals that took 10 months. And many people said it couldn't be done, but it was. So that established international criminal law, and in that criminal law, the greatest crime was starting an aggressive war. So a number of those defendants ended up being hanged for that crime of starting an aggressive war. The second most important crime was crimes against humanity, which meant both crimes against individuals and crimes against human collectivities. So this was part of a group of steps that the US took at that time, particularly under Roosevelt and Truman, to try and create a more peaceful, a more rights-driven kind of world. And so it included, with the Nuremberg Project, was also the establishment of the United Nations, dedicated to peace, which was established in San Francisco in May 1945. Then there was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which was drafted again in the face of great difficulty under the leadership of Eleanor Roosevelt on the shores of Lake Success in New York. And finally, there was the International Convention for the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, also adopted by the United Nations in 1948, and the concept of genocide and the concept of this convention was developed in the United States by a Polish-Jewish refugee, Raphael Lemkin. So the reason I'm giving you this background is because the rest of this talk is going to be about an ethical decline and fall. But in order to understand the fall, we have to understand the great height at which it began. So one of my special interests is in genocide, and a few months before this novel was published, late last year, my colleague Tom Taps and I published another book called The Magnitude of Genocide. So it's a big interest of mine. So I want to start with this decline, talking in relation to genocide itself. And in particular, there's an extraordinary study by the woman who was the Obama administration's ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, who's written a 621-page book, which won the Pulitzer Prize, by the way, called A Problem from Hell, America and the Age of Genocide. Now, since the Second World War, and since establishing that unprovoked aggression against another country is the greatest crime in the book, the United States has actually invaded foreign countries 200 times in small and large invasions. So one would imagine that the USA, as being the very first signatory of the Genocide Convention, would have taken initiatives to stop the genocides that have occurred since the Second World War. Sorry, it has not ever put boots on the ground to do that. It has always looked the other way or just plain refused to be involved. And we, as the most servile of the United States' allies, has a similar record. We've also signed and ratified the Genocide Convention, but never done anything about it, except with the possible exception of the Australian military incursion into East Timor in 1999, where the Indonesians were arguably in the act of committing a genocide against the East Timorese. The only action that the US has ever taken to stem a genocide was participation in the NATO bombing of Serbia in the mid-90s and of Serbian troops in Kosovo in the late 90s, when they were involved in a genocide against Muslims, particularly in Kosovo. The genocides that they were missing in action in were among the most major ones were Cambodia in the late 1970s, Iraq in the late 1980s, in Rwanda in 1994, and in former Yugoslavia in the late 1990s. These were all cases that cried out for military intervention, but none came from the US. In fact, the only armies that have ever gone in to stop a genocide have been the Indian Army in what was then East Pakistan, the Vietnamese Army, which put an end to the Khmer Rouge's genocide, and the Rwanda Patriotic Front, a small ragtag army that managed to stop the genocide in Rwanda. Now, what is also striking is that US recalcitrance in the suppression of genocide didn't stop at acts of omission. In fact, the American government continued to lend diplomatic support to the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia during the genocide, but even after the Vietnamese had thrown the Khmer Rouge out of government. An absolutely astonishing piece of diplomatic history, partly because the Americans greatly disliked the Vietnamese for having defeated them in the war in Vietnam, and therefore anyone was better than them. The other one, which was interesting, is the genocide against the Kurds committed by the Iraqi regime, Saddam's regime, in the mid-80s, while it was using gas and chemical weapons against the Kurds. The Americans continued, knowing full well what was going on, not only continued with its diplomatic support, but major economic credits and armaments deliveries to that regime. So it's a pretty grim tale, and Samantha Power goes on for hundreds of pages to tell it. This person who became the US ambassador to the UN. And she ends by saying, simply put, American leaders did not act because they did not want to. One of the most important conclusions I have reached, therefore, is that the US record is not one of failure, it is one of success. Troubling though it is to acknowledge, US officials worked the system and the system worked. So that's a fairly major statement from a person of this authority, and as citizens of America's most servile ally, the Sancho Panza to the American Don Quixote, we might want to know, what is this system that Samantha Power is referring to? And to get to that question, I want to go to another very senior American authority, Chalmers Johnson, a very eminent an analyst of American affairs with impeccable non-leftish credentials. He was a naval officer in the Korean War. He was a consultant to the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, between 1967 and 1973. He became an eminent academic. He was a lifetime supporter of the American Republican tradition. I'd like to think he's probably was the last small Republican ever in the Republican Party when he died in 2010. But because of that, he entertained dire fears for American democracy and constitutional observance in the post-war era, and not least after 9/11. Now, Chalmers is running a basic line that the United States has turned into an imperial power, something that the founders, the framers of the US Constitution of 1787, which is the one that's still in currency now, were absolutely determined to prevent this kind of thing from happening, because the framers of the Constitution understood, as their successors like Chalmers Johnson understood in the Republican tradition, that empire and war are the sworn enemies of democratic governance at home. So Chalmers traces this consolidation of America's global military reach, and he explains it in terms of 4 factors. The first one was military Keynesianism. Now, at the end of the Second World War, virtually every Western country made a solemn commitment to maintain full employment as their main goal of economic policy, except for the United States. And the American political elite said we can skip that. It sounds a bit socialist. So what we'll do is we'll continue to stimulate the arms industry in order to maintain de facto full employment without having to make a formal commitment to it. So if you're going to produce lots of weapons and munitions, they're good, we've got musicians too, they're good ones. Then you've got to have someone to buy them and someone to deploy them, and that means, of course, a huge military establishment. The second of these factors was, of course, the Cold War, and so military rivalry with the Soviet Union was an important reason, or at least excuse, to keep making a lot of weapons. And so these 2 factors are kind of mutually supportive. The third factor was America's dependence on imported oil, imported energy, mainly from the Middle East. So there was a big focus on the Middle East to ensure what these days would be called oil security or energy security. So these 3 factors meant that the US was maintaining itself as the world's great military superpower. And what that meant, particularly when it came to the politics of the Middle East, was that there were an enormous number of incursions and interferences with countries in the Middle East. And one of the very first of these was, well, probably the first in the Middle East, was the coup in Syria in 1949, organised by the CIA in order to defend the interests of the Arabian-American oil company known as Aramco. And that overthrew probably Syria's first and last chance of maintaining a decent democratic kind of government. But then came 1953 when the CIA organised a coup against, again, a democratic government in Iran for much the same reason, because the Iranians were planning to nationalise the oil on the absurd argument that they actually owned it, since it was on their land. And it was then that the CIA invented a very interesting concept for its own tradecraft, which was called blowback. The CIA, which contains a lot of intellectuals, came to the insight that if you interfere with other countries' affairs, like organising coups against their popularly elected governments, then maybe they might get angry and do something in return. And this doing something in return was called blowback. It refers to, in general, to negative consequences for the United States and its allies to any interference that the Americans deem appropriate. So, what Chalmers is saying about blowback is it wasn't just a series of one-off events, but that it created a vicious circle. That when the blowback comes, often as a reaction to a clandestine American incursion, the American public doesn't know anything about the American incursion. So when the blowback comes, it appears and is made to appear like an unprovoked attack on American assets, American citizens, American military assets, and so on. And this creates, therefore, a warlike sentiment in America, which leads to more incursions, which leads to more blowback. So this becomes the fourth factor behind the growth of the American military establishment and its need to be constantly on a war footing, if not actually involved in a war. Now, one of the effects of that is to make the office of the US President change from being the elected executive of a constitutional democracy to being the Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces in real or rhetorical wartime. The rhetorical wars are things like the war on terror, which is not actually a war, but you call it a war, and then that gives the US President an excuse to take all sorts of unconstitutional steps that he otherwise would not be allowed to take. Now, I want to get back to the CIA, which you all have realised has a deal to do with this kind of mayhem. So what is the CIA? It was founded in 1947 as a successor to a previous intelligence organisation called the Office of Strategic Services, which is very much part of the Nuremberg story because it served the American prosecution in Nuremberg. It did lots of useful work, but then it was abolished and replaced by the CIA. Now the CIA was set up to serve the US President alone. The President is its only client. And it's got two jobs, or at least according to its charter. One is to supply intelligence and assessments of threats to US security, and the second one is to undertake subsidiary operations, quote unquote, including the ones like I've just mentioned in Syria in 1949 and then in Iran in 1953. Now, in Johnson's analysis, which spreads over 4 books, the CIA has become, and very quickly became, the President's private secret army. it is on that basis that it has engineered all these coups, organised military incursions, almost invariably against democratic governments. I mean, when you ever hear on great occasions in the United States somebody saying, and our manifest destiny is to spread freedom and democracy in the world, all you have to do is look at the history of the CIA. There's a very good one available to see that the exact opposite is the case. So a selective list of the CIA's coups against democratic governments would include two I've mentioned: Guatemala in 1954, Indonesia 1957-58, Brazil and South Korea both in 1961, Greece in 1964, Ghana 1966, the Philippines on multiple occasions, and Chile in 1973. The agency has mounted also the abortive 1961 invasion of the Bay of Pigs in Cuba, and has made several attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro, all fortunately unsuccessful. Its secretiveness confers unaccountability and plausible deniability, I doesn't like that term, plausible deniability for all its transgressions on its one and only client, the US President. And Johnson comments, and I quote him here, "The CIA remains the main executive branch department in charge of overthrowing foreign governments, promoting regimes of state terrorism, kidnapping people of interest to the administration and sending them to friendly foreign countries to be tortured and or killed, assassination and torture of prisoners in violation of international and domestic law, and numerous other exercises that both the President and the country in which they are executed want to be able to deny." So in direct contravention of the United States Constitution, the CIA's entire budget of $14.7 billion is kept secret from the public and immune from congressional oversight, along with around 40% of the US military budget, which itself is $600 billion per annum. And so long before 9/11, and as an essential precondition to it, the CIA, in league with its British counterpart, MI6, launched its most fateful intervention in Afghanistan in July 1979, and this is the intervention which has actually produced the world we live in now. We are living with all the consequences of this intervention. So what was it? The CIA armed and encouraged jihadi extremists, the Mujahideen, to revolt against the progressive secular regime in Kabul, which was pro-Soviet. And the reason why the Mujahideen abhorred this government was one of its main policies was to provide schooling for girls. And this was the basis upon which the Mujahideen launched its revolt against the government. And it did so prompted by the CIA. And the reason for that was the CIA had this master plan, the US having had its head kicked in, so to say, in Vietnam. The idea was that the Soviet Union should suffer a similar fate. So the idea was to organise this revolt, train the Mujahideen to attack the Kabul government, to lure the Soviet Union into supporting the Afghani government, and thus the Soviet Union would get bogged down in a counterinsurgency and so it would get its own Vietnam. That was the plan. And as we probably all aware, after 6 months of this Mujahideen rebellion, the Soviet Union did come to the assistance of the Afghani government, and at that point the CIA ramped up its support for the Mujahideen in order to intensify the civil war that had started, and to fatally cripple the Soviet Union. I've got it. There's a great book by Steve Coll called Ghost Wars, very fat book, also a Pulitzer Prize winner, about all this history of Afghanistan and later on. Now, he interviewed a lot of people, including a lot of ex-CIA operatives, including Howard Hart, who was in charge of clandestine operations in Afghanistan for the CIA. He was head of station in Pakistan. And Hart said that his orders were, and these are Hart's own words, paraphrasing his superiors: "Here's your bag of money, go raise hell, don't fuck it up, just go out there and kill Soviets and take care of the Pakistanis and make them do whatever you need to make them do." So that was the CIA agenda. Among the beneficiaries of the CIA's tutelage and largesse was a promising young Saudi fanatic called Osama bin Laden, whom you've probably heard of. And the Americans not only trained him and his followers, a nice bunch of people called Al-Qaeda, the Americans also set them up with a base in Khost province in eastern Afghanistan. So the sequel is well known. The Soviet Union suffered 15,000 war dead and withdrew from Afghanistan in 1989, only to itself collapse in 1991. Mission accomplished then. In the process, 1.8 million Afghanis were killed in the civil war that the CIA had started. 2.6 million became refugees. One of the elements of the Mujahideen, the Taliban, seized control of Kabul in 1996, while another, Al-Qaeda, then turned its attention on its erstwhile patron, the US itself, and began to launch attacks on American military assets, American citizens, and eventually America itself in 9/11. So this is really the backstory to 9/11 and today's still ongoing wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the rise of ISIS. Well, presidential fury and hubris after 9/11 unleashed the CIA from whatever moral and legal restraints that had ever been on it. Bush regarded himself as a commander-in-chief in wartime rather than a president of a constitutional democracy, and began this whole rhetoric about the war on terror, which Philippe Sands, the great international lawyer who was out here last year, calls not just the war on terror was actually a war on law, as Bush claimed exemption from all legal, constitutional and treaty compliance. And Sands goes on to say that the Bush administration made a conscious decision to propel its assault on global rules. So tyranny breeds lawlessness at home as well. Kidnap and torture, which had been just a small and furtive part of the CIA's operations, now became a major part of it. The United States was at the time, still is, a signatory of the 1984 UN Convention Against Torture, but that didn't count at all. The CIA began kidnapping large numbers of people from North America, Western Europe and the Middle East, and sending them to torture-friendly allied countries, Egypt and Syria in the main, and the black sites we've heard a lot about in Poland and elsewhere, as well as, of course, their own large facilities in Abu Ghraib, Bagram Air Base and Guantanamo Bay. So how did this, very occasionally there was some sort of legalistic excuse, and Bush's final contribution to jurisprudence was to call the people who'd thus been rounded up and sent to these torture centres, he called them bad people and unlawful combatants who had no legal protections whatsoever, not even ones going back to 1215 and Magna Carta. And I'm sure we all recall in this room the footage of what happened in these places, like Bagram Air Base, Abu Ghraib and so forth. Appalling acts of sadism. So much so that the usually compliant US Senate eventually launched its own inquiry into the so-called extraordinary rendition program under which all this occurred. And it produced a report, a very long report, which essentially said that the whole CIA program was ill-conceived, poorly managed and entirely fruitless, given that the excuse for it was the gathering of intelligence, and no intelligence was actually gathered. Now that report, of course, is dynamite, so it was suppressed, except for a relatively small part of the executive summary.
What year?
That report, I've actually got I think it was about 2012, I think. Yeah. Now, as far as Australia is concerned, we have been complicit in all of this. Our greatest act of complicity, of course, was in the invasion of Iraq, an unprovoked attack, the biggest crime in the international criminal law book. Then, of course, we have also been complicit in the torture program, with the Howard government condoning and in fact applauding the illegal detention and torture of two of our compatriots, David Hicks and Mahmoud Habib. Quite in contradiction to the rule of law and all those conventions that Australia too has signed up to, the Convention Against Torture, the rights of prisoners of war, and so on and so forth. And more broadly, American strategic missteps, lawlessness and contempt for the heritage of the progressive 1940s have contaminated Australia's own political culture. And we can see this most spectacularly in our bipartisan refugee policy and the way it is implemented, which flagrantly violates not only basic decency, but a whole series of international conventions which Australia has ratified. Conventions that assert the rights of people in distress on the high seas, asylum seekers, women, children, and the convention, of course, that outlaws torture. We regularly receive reports from about our detention centres from UN compliance committees that come from time to time to inspect them, and when these dreadful reports are duly issued by the compliance committee, and they get a bit of publicity in the Australian press, and the Australian government always sneers at them and comes up with the usual excuse that a perpetrator state comes up with, which is these compliance committees are messing with our national sovereignty. We don't take orders from Geneva. In Philippe Sands's account of the American flight from legality during the Bush period, he talks about the legal black hole that was created when Bush declared the prisoners of the CIA to be bad people and illegal combatants, completely outside the law, absolutely rightless. And so this legal black hole is what we have reproduced in Australia for these refugee centres. And the legal black hole is something that we can see the examples of in Abu Ghraib, etc., but also Manus Island and Nauru. These are also examples of legal black holes where people are held without trial for years, women and children included, under appalling conditions which, in the view of at least one UN compliance committee, adds up to torture. So like the US, we have become fugitives from the rule of law that the Australian government hypocritically claims to uphold. Among other things, in its cherished list of Australian values, which candidates for citizenship are supposed to sign up to. So whatever strategic rationalisations that partisans of our American alliance might ventilate, there can be no doubt that it has greatly diminished us as a supposedly moral and peace-loving people.